Number 10. Baby stealing bestie. When mom-to-be Heidi Broussard learned that her best friend, Megan Firamuska, was also pregnant, she was thrilled. The pair shared in their excitement about becoming parents together and even wondered if they would give birth on the same day. But sadly, Firamuska wasn't actually pregnant, and in late 2019, Broussard and her weeks-old baby vanished from their home in Austin, Texas. Just days later, police found Broussard's remains inside a duffel bag in a car parked outside Firamuska's home outside Houston. Officers showed the woman's boyfriend a photo of Broussard's baby, and he allegedly said that the child looked like a baby inside their house. In fact, he reportedly encouraged Texas Rangers to enter the home once he learned that the baby might be a kidnapping victim. Concerned for the infant's safety, the Rangers entered the home without a warrant and found the child unharmed. Firamuska was indicted on charges of capital murder and kidnapping. Since police entered her house without a warrant, her attorney fought to keep certain evidence withheld during the trial. However, the judge overseeing the case allowed all the evidence to be presented. The case was slated to go to trial in 2022, but there have been no updates on whether Firamuska was convicted of the charges she faces, indicating that the proceedings are ongoing. Number 9. Brandon Thomas Clark. 20-year-old Vernon Stokes was found dead with at least 10 gunshot wounds on a Metairie, Louisiana street in late May of 2022. Police went through the victim's phone and found a series of photos that show his best friend, 22-year-old Brandon Thomas Clark, posing in front of him with a gun. The pictures were taken at the crime scene just minutes before Stokes was shot repeatedly, giving him essentially no chance of survival. It also appeared as though someone had gone through the young man's car before fleeing the scene. Several weeks after the shooting, U.S. Marshals apprehended Thomas Clark in Texas, and he faces a second-degree murder charge in connection with Stokes' death. Vernon's mother, Nichelle Stokes, told NOLA.com that she was utterly shocked by the news. She said that Vernon and Thomas Clark grew up together and were like brothers, and that she treated the suspect like a son. Nichelle told police that the pair were out celebrating Thomas Clark's birthday when the fatal shooting occurred. Thomas Clark has denied any involvement in the murder, claiming that he wasn't even there when it happened. However, prosecutors believe that the photos found in Stokes' phone prove otherwise and are prepared to argue their case at trial. The suspect is currently being held in jail with a bail set at $500,000. Number 8. Bondage between besties. For 17 years, Shauna Littlewood and Sarah Holden shared what they believed was an inseparable bond. Unfortunately, their connection proved to be a lot more fragile than they realized in 2017 after an evening of drinking together in South Yorkshire, England. The pair became intimate that night and decided to play a 50 Shades type game in which Littlewood tied Holden's wrists and ankles to a bedpost. She told her captive bestie that she was leaving the room to grab a prop and returned moments later with a knife. She then stabbed the bound woman 18 times in the face, neck, chest, and legs. Holden survived the attack after undergoing a 14-hour emergency operation and spending 4 days on life support. She also endured a tracheotomy, a torn heart, and a collapsed lung. The young woman was left with horrifying scars running from her chest all the way down to her belly button. She told detectives that her best friend turned attacker had yelled, "Sorry, princess," while repeatedly plunging the blade into her flesh. Holden also remembered drifting in and out of consciousness and being unable to scream due to the wounds in her neck. After attacking her best friend, Littlewood allegedly sat down and watched TV. She eventually started to realize the gravity of the situation and called a relative for advice, and the family member called for help. Littlewood pleaded guilty to attempted murder and received a life sentence with a minimum of 7 years. Number 7. Denise Williams and Brian Winchester. Married couple Denise and Mike Williams had plans for a romantic weekend getaway on December 16, 2000, but the trip never happened. That afternoon, Denise called her father and said that Mike never returned to their Tallahassee home after venturing out for an early morning duck hunt at Lake Seminole, roughly 50 miles, 80 kilometers away. The Florida Fish and Wildlife Commission, FWC, got involved, and an initial search turned up Mike's abandoned boat and SUV. However, Mike himself remained missing. Authorities surmised that if Mike drowned, his remains would surface within 3 to 7 days of his disappearance. And while some of his belongings periodically turned up over the following months, his body was never found. His disappearance was nevertheless ruled as a fatal drowning based on the theory that his fishing waders had filled with water and caused him to sink. Some believed that he may have been eaten by alligators, which would explain why his body was never discovered. In the meantime, Denise Williams petitioned to have her husband declared legally dead and collected on a $1.5 million life insurance policy. Mike's mother, Cheryl Williams, refused to believe that her son's death was an accident. After 4 years of campaigning for further investigation, the FWC reopened the case. By then, Denise had married her late husband's best friend, Brian Winchester. While some found it to be a suspiciously odd arrangement, others simply assumed that the pair had come together in grief over the loss of Mike. Investigators determined that alligators don't feed in the winter, debunking the theory that Mike was eaten by the reptiles, and the case was closed again in 2007. The following year, the Florida Department of Financial Services opened yet another unsuccessful investigation based on suspicions of financial fraud. By 2012, Brian Winchester and Denise Williams' marriage was on the rocks. After being kidnapped by Winchester on her way to work one morning, Williams told police that he had killed her first husband. Winchester received a 20-year sentence, followed by 15 years of probation, but Denise wasn't off the hook. In early 2019, she was sentenced to life in prison for her role in Mike's death. His remains have since been found, and a medical examiner confirmed his manner of death as a homicide. Number 6. Tevin Morissette. Deputies in Eddy County, New Mexico, were en route to the location of a reported shooting in 2022 when they crossed paths with an SUV being driven by a 29-year-old rig worker named Tevin Morissette. In the back seat of the vehicle, officers found the man's best friend, 33-year-old Avery Weathers, suffering from a gunshot wound. The man died from his injuries, while Morissette was treated at a local hospital for bruises, cuts, and a dislocated shoulder. Morissette allegedly told detectives that he and Weathers had invited a co-worker to their trailer to grill steaks, drink beer and whiskey, and watch a basketball game. He said that at some point Weathers and himself began to argue over religion and claimed that his best friend challenged him to a fight and attacked him. He said that he then crawled to his SUV, retrieved his gun, and shot Weathers in self-defense. The co-worker said that he broke up the fight and that Weathers was walking toward his trailer when Morissette retrieved his gun. He said that Weathers pleaded with him not to use the weapon, but that Morissette replied by saying, "Someone's gonna die tonight." The young men's boss allegedly showed up at the scene after hearing the gunfire and helped load Weathers into the suspect's SUV after Morissette called 911 and reported his own crime. He now faces a charge of open murder in connection with his best buddy's death. Number 5. Tyne Coots. Carlasia Mew and Tyne Coots grew up together and were best friends before they became roommates. However, something went terribly wrong between the 21-year-olds in late 2021 when Tyne stabbed Carlasia to death at their Jeffersonville, Indiana apartment. Sadly, the victim left behind 4 children. Her sister, Keena Dixon, witnessed the stabbing and would later tell the court how she watched helplessly as Carlasia's life slipped away. Shortly after the brutal attack, Carlasia's mother, Brandy Mew, told local station WDRB that the young women got into an argument after returning home from a gambling bout. The disagreement escalated into a physical fight, which then turned into murder. Brandy said that she still didn't understand how or why things got so violent. Tainay later pled guilty to reckless homicide. At her sentencing, Corlasia's family members testified that the victim was a loving, caring, and supportive mother whose life was taken from her far too soon. They urged the judge to impose the maximum sentence of 6 years, while Tainay's relatives pleaded for leniency. The judge overseeing the case ultimately sentenced her to 5 years behind bars for the murder. Number 4. Patrick Griffin and James Knapp. 59-year-old Patrick Griffin and 65-year-old James Knapp were best friends for 20 years before things took a deadly turn one Saturday in 2022 when Knapp went to Griffin's New Fairfield, Connecticut home to watch the Kentucky Derby. Knapp's family members would later claim that the retired school teacher went to visit Griffin because he was concerned about his friend being alone and suspected that he struggled with substance abuse issues. State police responded to a call about a fight between the two men that night and found Knapp suffering from a stab wound to the chest. He was rushed to a hospital where he was later pronounced dead. Griffin allegedly admitted to killing his best friend, but claimed that he did so in self-defense after Knapp stamped on him and dragged him into his house. However, he was charged with manslaughter in connection with Knapp's death. In a statement, police said that intoxicating substances may have played a role in the violent attack. Shortly after Griffin's arraignment, Superior Court Judge Dan Shaben lowered his bail from $1 million to $750,000, citing evidence of possible self-defense in the police report. The judge also acknowledged that Griffin had prior convictions, but that none of them were recent. The Danbury-based News Times reported that Griffin appeared to be alert, but was in physical pain at the court hearing, and that he was breathing heavily until his attorney told him to sit down. Griffin's sister described the ordeal as a very tragic situation because they were best friends, adding that she attended the hearing because she wanted her brother to know that she supported him. Griffin's lawyer, Alexander Schwartz, said that his client is distraught over what happened. Number 3. Lauren Walsh. Something went wrong in the mind of a young woman named Lauren Walsh when she tried to kill her best friend, Kelsey Guylink, at the victim's home in Liverpool, England, in 2021. Walsh allegedly accused Guylink of killing her grandmother, who was still alive, and then stabbed the victim 18 times. Guylink's partner, Wesley Pemberton, walked into the room during the attack. Walsh then turned her aggression toward him and stabbed him 3 times. She was convicted of 2 counts of attempted murder and received a life sentence for her crimes. During the trial, prosecutors revealed that Walsh had used Guylink's credit card at various home goods stores before the brutal attack. However, this failed to explain what she was thinking when she committed the horrific act. Guylink and Pemberton told the court that they planned to sell their home because they kept finding blood droplets despite their repeated efforts to clean the crime scene. They ended up staying with relatives due to the traumatic memories associated with the home, and realized that the only way for them to truly move on was to sell the house that they had once planned on spending their lifetimes in. Number 2. Blake Miller. 18-year-old Blake Miller and his best friend, 18-year-old Tanner Farrell, were hanging out with a friend in Omaha, Nebraska in early 2022 when Miller pointed his rifle at Farrell and pulled the trigger. Unfortunately, the young man died from his injuries. Douglas County Attorney Don Klein charged Miller with manslaughter. He acknowledged that the teen may have believed the gun was unloaded, but that his reckless actions fit the very definition of the crime. In a shocking turn of events, the judge overseeing the case released Miller from custody without bail. He claimed that he let him go so that he could graduate from high school on time and grieve Farrell's death. If convicted, Miller could face up to 20 years in prison, and while he may not have intentionally betrayed his best friend, the evidence suggests that he showed a complete disregard for Farrell's safety. As of now, the outcome of the case remains to be seen. Number 1. Zaya Brooks. On July 26, 2022, Zaya Brooks got into the back seat of his best friend's car in Detroit and allegedly shot 17-year-old Edmund Lamont Butler in the head. Butler's body was found in the driver's seat of his car later that day. By then, the shooter had fled the scene, and a weeks-long investigation ensued. Authorities have declined to comment on the circumstances surrounding the deadly incident and are accusing Brooks of first-degree premeditated murder, felony murder carrying a concealed weapon, and 2 counts of felony firearm possession. Although the suspect is only a teenager, he has been charged as an adult. In a statement, prosecutor Kim Worthy said that the defendant's actions display a significant degree of decisiveness and weighing of his options in the killing of his avowed best friend. She summarized the crime in just a few words, describing it as truly tragic, any way you look at it. Would you rather catch your best friend making out with your partner or stealing cash out of your wallet? Let us know in the comments below and hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.